Hi, welcome to another IELTS video. Today we are looking at 9 more words that can help enhance the academic tone of both your speaking and writing. If you find this video helpful, come join us at the forum IELTSnetwork.com, where you can interact with me and with other IELTS instructors and the online international IELTS community. For more videos like this one, visit my blog at IELTS.com. So, very similar to last week's video, I'm going to run through the 9 words. I will define them and then I will show you how you can use them in your exam. The first is not a single word, but a combination. So we have on par. And on par is a phrase in English that is typically used to mean something that's similar to something else or even equal to something else. And in your speaking, if the examiner, perhaps in part 1, were to ask you what makes you a competitive student, which is a question that students have reported to me in email, you could use on par something like this. I'm diligent and I am not afraid of hard work. My grades last semester were on par with the best students in my program, so I feel it would be accurate to say I am motivated by success. Okay, and here all we're saying is that the community of best students in the program had marks that were similar to the marks that you had, so you're indirectly saying that you are among the strongest students in your program. For writing, there was a question recently that asked, it was something like, some people believe parents should strictly control their children's behavior, others feel children should be allowed measures of freedom to promote their natural characters and to allow them to grow as individuals. And then it was reported, I saw 2 different versions that the question was reported. One was as a discussion, one was as an argument, so do you agree or disagree? But the example sentence here could be something we would put at the end of a discussion essay. So we've looked at both sides of the argument, and now we're sharing our personal position. So this would be the first sentence of the conclusion paragraph. After looking at both sides of this discussion, my personal sentiments are on par with the idea that strict parental control produces a more productive member of society. Okay, and all you're saying here is that your feelings are similar to the opinion that you've looked at earlier in the essay, that strict parental control is better than more lenient parenting styles. Okay, so that's on par. Now, our second word for today is volatile. And volatile is a word that you've probably seen me use in my videos. It's a word that means something that's unstable, and typically it's used to describe something that's kind of negative in nature, so maybe a figure that has been unstable and is producing a negative result because of that. So, for example, in the speaking, you might be asked about your hobbies in part 1, and you could use volatile in this way. My professional schedule has been quite volatile this past year. I've thus found it difficult to maintain hobbies. I tend to exercise when I can, but I wouldn't say there is a regular pattern to it. Okay, and all we are saying here is that our schedule, our work schedule, is not a stable schedule. So maybe it's been bouncing around, and maybe this is, when we use the word volatile here, it's negative in nature, slightly negative. So because it's been unstable, it's been difficult to find time to engage the hobbies that we enjoy. Okay, and volatile is obviously a good word to use in task 1 if you're taking the academic, because it helps you to describe figures that if it's, for example, a bar chart or a line graph, figures that are going up and down and are not stable over a period of time. And we can change volatile to volatility to as a noun to fit in this manner. So the figures exhibit volatility between the years 1996 and 2000. However, a reversion to stability is seen in 2002. So what we're saying here is that between these 4 years, the figures were quite unstable. Perhaps there was a period around 2001 where things start to stabilize more, and then clear stability is seen in 2002. And reversion just means it's reverted back to a stable position that was perhaps seen before 1996. Okay. Okay. We can also use the word volatile in our task 2. And you may recall that recently there was a question that was asking about tourism and whether it is important for countries that depend predominantly on tourism to develop other industries, maybe to stabilize their economies. That was the essay question. So we might use volatile in this way. Now here we're sharing an example, and I've also provided the discussion and I believe the conclusion sentence. You can see how the whole thing kind of works together. So for example, the volatile nature of weather in Caribbean countries can make tourism industries unpredictable and therefore unreliable. For these countries, providing people with greater access to the internet would empower workers and allow them to both educate themselves and develop online businesses in the services sector. Thus, because a varied economy promotes stability, tourist-dependent countries should do what they can to establish other industries. Okay, so here we're taking the position that if a country is dependent entirely on tourism, this is actually something of a negative thing, because you're kind of putting all of your eggs into one basket. It's a better idea to choose to develop other industries to kind of balance out the economy. And as the question asked, we are here sharing a suggestion of how a country could do that. Okay, the third word is plateau, and this is a word that I've used several times in my example videos, and it's a word that I've also used in some of the contests that we've held on the website. It's a great word to use to talk about a period of time that shows inactivity, so things are not really changing one way or the other, they're kind of just remaining stable. And this can be a positive thing, it can also be a negative thing. So in the speaking, you could possibly receive a cue card that asks you to explain in detail your relationship to the English language. So perhaps how you've grown as an English student, as a student of English, and you could use plateau in this way if you were to talk about perhaps a period of time in your history of study where things were not really growing one way or the other. So for example, when I first started studying English in Australia, my skills grew rapidly. However, after I returned to my home country, my language abilities unfortunately plateaued. Okay, just to show how you could use it as a verb, or hit a plateau, or it could be used as a noun. And I know my spell checker is showing this is incorrect. It is actually correct. I just don't think it's in my Microsoft Word dictionary. I attribute this to the fact that I did not have anyone to practice English with. Okay, so all you're saying here is that there was a period of time during your studies in the past where the progression that you were making with the English language sort of lagged. It stopped. It didn't go one way or the other. It just kind of stayed the same. Okay, and plateau is a perfect word to use to describe this sort of situation. Plateau is also a good word to use in task 1 for the academic, because you will, on occasion, see a graph, and that graph could show a period of that lacks change, so it's just kind of a straight line. Things are not changing one way or the other. And you might write something like this. Following rapid growth from 60 to 180 barrels in the first month of 2002, corn oil production hit a plateau of 200 barrels between February and April. In May, however, the trend once again reverts to climbing and reaches the highest point for the year at 275 barrels. Okay, so all you've said here is that there was a period of growth at the beginning. It hits a plateau, so it's kind of unchanging for several months between February and April. So it stays at 200 barrels, and then after April it starts to climb again. Okay, word number 4 is peak, and peak is a verb that is used to describe something that stimulates interest. And so in your speaking in part 1, or perhaps even in part 3, you might be asked to talk about maybe how you chose to get into the career that you're in, or how you chose your area of study, or something like this. And peak is a good word to use here. So after visiting a science and technology museum as a child, my interest in computer programming was piqued. And all we're saying is that when I was a child, I went to the museum, I saw something that I thought was really cool, and that's what kind of sparked my interest in this path towards computer programming. So this could be a nice way that you would explain to the examiner how you first became interested in your professional area or your academic area. For task 2, you could also use peak. Every once in a while, I hear some sort of connection between technology and the classroom, and it seems to, there are different questions, but they kind of try to connect these two ideas together. So if we were given the question, say, technology in the classroom, is this a good thing? Or technology in the classroom is a good thing, do you agree or disagree? So something like an argument essay style of question. We might start one of the paragraphs like this. Firstly, technology can pique the interest of students in a way that encourages focus and information retention. Okay, so all we're saying is that technology can help students be more engaged in their studies in the classroom. So obviously this would be supporting the idea of technology in the classroom. For example, modern university lecture halls make it possible for classrooms in Canada to use music, voice, and the internet as a means of maintaining the attention of students during class time. Okay, so just developing the initial claim further. Okay, word number 5 is contrary, and I imagine many of you are familiar with this word. Contrary is a word that we can use to introduce an opposing idea, or to flip a discussion and talk about something that's kind of opposite. So in the speaking, you could be asked about your family. That's a very common thing to talk about in part 1. And you might be asked to talk about the specific members of your family. And so in this case, talking about siblings. So we might say something like, contrary to my personality, my sister is very outgoing and tends to make friends easily. Okay, and of course we would use this to describe personality traits, in this specific example, personality traits that are completely different from our own. So when you say a sentence like this, the examiner knows that you are saying that you are an introverted person, and here you're talking about your sister, who's the opposite, is an outgoing and easily makes friends. So their personality is the opposite of yours. We can also use contrary in our writing to turn a discussion and look at an opposite idea. On the contrary, several disadvantages stem from the use of technology in the classroom. Okay, and now this would be more of a discussion style of essay, perhaps an disadvantage type of essay. So this would be the second supporting paragraph. We're looking at the opposing ideas. On the contrary, would not be something you would use to start the first supporting paragraph of your essay, because you haven't actually looked at anything yet. So I hope I'm being clear there, but you know, after you've looked at one side, now you're going to look at the other side. On the contrary would be the phrase that you could use to do that. It actually is pretty much exactly like on the other hand. Word number 6, parallel. And parallel can be used as a verb or a noun, or an adjective actually, but we won't look at it that way here. Parallel is something that occurs in the same manner as something else. So again, if we were talking about siblings, like we were just a moment ago, we might say something like, my university experiences paralleled those of my brother. And what we're saying here is that the experiences that my brother had turned out to be the same sort of experiences that I had. So perhaps my brother, he made a lot of friends in his first year, and he changed his major in his second year. And you know, there were certain things that were similar between his experiences and my experiences. And parallel is a perfect verb to use here to show that. We can also use parallel if we are talking about, oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to point out another way that you could use it to state the same example. There are clear parallels, noun, between my university experiences and those of my brother. Okay, so 2 different ways you can use it here. Now, when you are writing, if you're writing the general exam and your task 1 question could say something like, now very recently the question came up, write a letter to a friend recommending a book. Okay, describe the book, describe why your friend would like the book, describe how she or he can obtain the book. And so we could use parallel in this way. So we're showing our friend why we feel that this book would be a good match for their taste. So firstly, several parallels exist between Harry Potter and other fantasy series you likely have enjoyed. If you like the setting of The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter will not disappoint you, as it takes place in a medieval world richly populated by both humans and other forms of intelligent life. So as you can see, all we're doing here is we're using the word parallels to just show that we know that this person enjoyed The Lord of the Rings, and because they enjoyed The Lord of the Rings, they will likely also enjoy a book like Harry Potter. Okay, because there are several similarities between the two, and that's what the word parallel refers to. Okay, let's see, word number 7 is embrace. And I think most people know embrace to mean to hold closely in a loving way, to give somebody a hug. That's not really what it means in this sense. Here, when we use embrace, we're talking about something that is accepted, with an A, accepted willingly, and something that you might use to your advantage. So, for example, in the speaking, you could say something like, I embraced the opportunity to study abroad. So what this means is the opportunity was there, and you did not ignore it. You went and you took the opportunity, and you took advantage of the opportunity, and used it. You've accepted it, and you've used it to benefit yourself. So I embraced the opportunity to study abroad. Okay, or you could talk about in a job interview. If you were to, I don't know, to describe a job interview in your IELTS exam, you might say something like, the interviewer asked me a question that was technical in nature, and I embraced the opportunity to demonstrate what I knew about this technological field. Now, embrace is also a word that we can use in the writing. Let's get this straightened out. So there was a question not too long ago that asked, should students study another language? And you might use the word embrace here. Thus, it is clear that students who embrace the study of another language are positioning themselves for future academic and professional opportunities. And you can tell by the language that this is it has a conclusive sort of tone to it. So this would be the conclusion sentence to one of the supporting paragraphs. So we're just saying that that these students, when they take the study of another language and they use it and they solidify their foundation in that language, they're really helping themselves create opportunities, both academic opportunities and professional opportunities. Word number 8 is hinder, and this is again a word that I've used several times in videos before. Hinder refers to something that makes something else weaker, or something that weakens something else, and it's a verb. And here in the speaking, you might be asked something about your studies or about your profession, and maybe the challenges that you've faced. So the examiner might ask something like, what are some challenges you faced while studying at university? And you could use hinder in this way. So distraction has definitely been a challenge for me. Being social, I feel, is a big part of the university experience. However, being too social can hinder a student's ability to focus, and this can directly impact academic performance. Okay, so we're just using the word hinder to show that that the idea of being too social can hurt or can weaken a student's ability to focus, and ultimately can weaken their academic performance. Okay, and this would be a direct answer to what the examiner is asking, which is about challenges you faced at university. We can also use hinder in our writing. Let's see here. So there was a question regarding how to improve world poverty, and we might use hinder in this way. So this would be this would be the first supporting paragraph. Firstly, addressing corruption around the world can bring protection to the rights of the poor, and this helps better the economic situation of those in need. For example, corruption in China has historically hindered the development of a legal system able to protect the poor against extortion. However, recent anti-corruption campaigns have shed some light on this problem, and this has led to modest improvement in the rights of those that lack wealth. Okay, and so all we were trying to do here is show how you could use hinder. So hinder to weaken, so corruption in China, it weakens the ability for China to develop its legal system. Okay, but then we turn it around and we say that, that things have been improving because the problem of corruption is being tackled by anti-corruption campaigns. And ultimately this has led to some modest improvement. Word number 9 is retain. And retain is a verb that means to keep or to hold on to. And so in the speaking, you could be asked something like, will you ever return to your home country? So if you were asked to talk about where you come from, maybe in part 1, and then the examiner says, oh, okay, so you're from there, but you're living here. Will you ever return to your home country? Yes, I believe I will someday. I've traveled quite a bit, but I've always retained a feeling that I'd like to live in my home country long term. And all we're saying here is that we have always kept or held on to a certain base feeling that at some point in the future we would return to our home country. Retain can also be used in the writing. There was a question, I don't think it was super recent, it might have been about a year ago, and the question was, what are the drawbacks of the world speaking one common language? Or it asked to look at the advantages and the disadvantages, but anyway, if we were looking at the negatives of the entire world speaking one common language, firstly, if a single language is spoken and taught the world over, this could make it difficult for people to retain their cultural identity. So this would, of course, be the topic sentence of a supporting paragraph, and then you would follow this with an example and discussion and so on. Okay, and all we're saying here is that if everybody is speaking one single language that comes from one part of the world, then perhaps their own culture, their own cultural identity, it would be difficult for this to be retained, for this to be kept. Okay, so I hope those 9 words are helpful. Please, as always, provide me with some feedback and come on over to IELTSnetwork.com to interact with me and with other people on the forums. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.